Hi, everybody.
Oh, do you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep. Hey.
Okay, good.
It looks like I had a problem with my headset. Let's wait a couple of more minutes. I hope at least Christian is going to be joining.
Yeah, I think Kevin might still be on. I know he's in the US at the moment, and I believe he may still be on PTO. So he hasn't been online in the past day or two.
Okay. Well, anyway, we have only one major topic for today, at least from our side, with pull request, what Christian has prepared. That's why I'm hoping what he will join to talk about.
Yep. Just a question. I see on the December 14th agenda that there was Ed and Christian discussed a prototype for the CDI and NRI plugins. Was that demoed in the video or in the meeting, or was it just discussed?
I don't remember, frankly speaking.
Okay, I'll quickly skim through the video then and see if there's, or the recording, and see if there's anything there. Oh, there's Christian as well.
This recording is actually another thing what I have to do, because I don't think the recording has automatically published.
Okay.
Christian, as you joined it, do you remember in beginning of December when you were showing that NRI CDI implementation, did you show it or was it just discussion on reference? Christian? Okay, 1 second. He's probably having some issues with it. So he just wrote in the chat, but for some reason he can't unmute.
Now I managed. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Do you hear me? It's a pain in the ass with this Zoom. Because the notification window that the meeting is being recorded was hidden under another window, and that's a modal dialogue. And before I tell it to okay, fine, I cannot unmute, and it's all the time somehow getting rendered so that it's not getting to the top.
Okay.
Really bad UI. Sorry. What was your question, Sasha? That in the last meeting when there was this recording?
So he even mentioned what in the beginning of December it was in a minutes reference to a CDI NRI plugin, and I frankly I don't remember already. Did you and that showed it, or it was just a reference on your code tree?
No, we showed it. So first, Ed demonstrated his integration through the direct integration through the runtime in container day, if I recall correctly. And then we demonstrated how that works with NRI plugin instead. So both.
Okay. Okay, great. So once the recording's available on YouTube, then I can watch the demo there as well. I haven't had a time to. Okay, cool, great. That's fine. That's I just wanted to find out because I saw it was discussed, and it would be interesting to see.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It should be visible, available there.
Well,
okay.
I need to publish them.
Yeah. Once it is available there, it should be visible. So yeah, cool.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's manual process, so I need to first log in into the Zoom with special credential, download them, and then upload to YouTube manually, which is not really handy. Anyway.
So it was the meeting when Kevin was here. So we demonstrated it to Kevin. Yeah. So are we waiting for Ed? Do you know? It's because he yesterday told that he was implying that he will join today. Should we ping also him?
I'll try to ping him 1 second. He's online, but in busy state, so I'm not sure. Maybe
because we have this. He is in busy state only because there is this, all hands with some organizational stuff.
Maybe.
Intel, so,
but anyway, I pinged him, so if he will be able, he will be joined. But I think we can start without him.
Okay, but I think that the only subject. Okay, so I think that the only subject today is basically the state of, at least from my point of view, is the state of the PR. Depending on that, basically. So I try to answer all the questions.
Yep.
And then, I'm free to discuss basically any of the subjects related to it.
Yeah, I think from my side, after your discussion, your responses and discussion, I think is actually all good. Like I say, I think maybe some of it has to do with the naming of some of the structures, like calling it sort of just and not being sure of how I would interact with it necessarily as a client. But I think we can move ahead with it. So I'll give it one more quick look after this meeting, and then either approve it. I think it's definitely much better than the API that we have at the moment, and it's a good place to build on. And if we want to add the advanced functionality like the refreshes and things like that to the implementation itself, instead of relying on allowing it from we expose it to the client but don't necessarily implement it directly, right? Then we can do that at a later stage. So I think definitely great improvement, and I don't see any blockers following your comments on the last sort of question I had. So yeah, I don't think unless there's anything specific that you want to sort of call out there or ask or discuss with regards to the PR.
Not really. So I think that if there are, so I also think that this is sort of a good starting point to basically build on top of. So if there are anything, unless there is some really blocking stuff, then I think that we could address any upcoming future concerns and features and so forth with further PRs.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, remind me one thing about it. So did we also have a prepared PR for Podman to update to a new API?
No.
No, because we did not remove the old one. So we didn't want to do it in one step. So that, because that's always tricky if you have to coordinate everything. So I think it's better to do it so that let's release the first one. And then let's try to update Podman so that switch it over. And then once we have switched everything over, then we can remove the old one if we want to, and not so that we would somehow need to coordinate all those efforts.
Yeah, so with regards to Podman, I know I've been talking about it for a long time. We at NVIDIA seem to be very good about talking about things, not necessarily doing them. But no, I do have I do want to sort of run through that end to end for NVIDIA devices. And in that sort of exercise, I can also update to the new API if it is required. At least see whether it is possible with what is there, or create PRs that actually move to the new API in Podman as I do that. So I wanted to look at it like the last 2 weeks of last year, but then I had to actually take 2 additional days of leave and not lose it. So then I sort of ran out of time. But that's sort of, I'll look at that this week and next week. So that should then be a good way to sort of push that forward.
Yeah. So is Podman the only third-party sort of external component which has CDI integration at the moment? Or is Docker also?
No, currently Podman is the only one that I know of. So, and I know that a lot of our users are sort of like saying, well, I've seen, especially with Podman being included in sort of Debian stable now and things like that, like we have users that are starting to say, well, why ask questions about how it works, and how it works there is different enough to other runtime engines or container engines, as we call them at that level, for it to be somewhat problematic. And so I think writing up something that shows how it can work using CDI would be useful to our users as well, and also sort of validate our API that we have and our direction going forward.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's sort of I want to look at that in the next, since I've new year, fresh start. I think that'll be my first thing that I do this year.
Okay.
So hopefully I can demo it. Maybe I can, let's say action items. These are, let's say, prepare Podman for next meeting, right? So I'm going to add that as an action item for me, that I will demonstrate sort of Podman working with NVIDIA GPUs, at least with the existing API. Ideally with PRs for new API, right? As well. So that I think should be a goal and an attainable goal for the next meeting as well.
Okay. So for the other runtimes, I think we are still in this little bit strange situation with the NRI. So if NRI, let's hope that it will move forward. So once NRI moves forward, so our efforts with NRI, then our preference for the other runtimes would be to add CDI support via a common single CDI plugin. So and that's what we have the sort of demonstration plugin for. But let's see how, because we don't know how that's. We will know more after this week's Thursday.
Okay, and maybe just a question with the. Sorry, go ahead, Sasha.
I was going to ask about related to that. So on Thursday it will be Container D community meeting where we want to bring the NRI topic. So it would be good if you and probably Kevin, if you guys can please join into a discussion. Okay,
would you be able to just forward a email to the invite for me or something, or just a link? Sorry, so then I don't have to go hunt for it.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, if or just a link so that I can add it to my calendar.
But before I interrupted, Ivan, you wanted to say something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I suppose my question was going to be that would the, let's call it medium to long-term plan then be to also implement an NRI plugin, NRI plugin support for NRI support for Podman? Or is that already, I'm not sure what is the state of that, or do we then have Podman using CDI directly and all other runtimes using NRI, or is that something that we want to avoid?
So that's a good question about Podman, because my understanding of Podman is that isn't it so that Podman is by design a serverless container runtime?
Yes, I think that might be the case.
So
okay, so then it's not, so NRI is only applicable to server, non-serverless runtimes.
Well, so some parts of NRI could, so there is nothing technically in there that would prevent you from integrating it with NRI, but the thing is that most of those things that we are interested in NRI, they are stateful, and they assume and they require that there is a single entity which is running. And so this, to be honest, we have not considered at all a serverless implementation and the consequences of that, because it was just not on the radar.
Okay, so it sounds as if that's not, then basically the summary is that for the time being, runtime such as Podman would be using CDI directly.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's how it should be.
It's still open question how we want to go with Docker. But again, it's another story. At least like our initial hope was what if we can add it directly into containerd, and when in containerd it will be covering all the clients, when we are fine.
Yeah, well, you would need to at least, there may still be some plumbing required, right? Like to ensure that Docker plays nice with the way that the devices are selected and doesn't do any checks beforehand, for example.
Yeah, well, that's verification stages. Yes.
Yeah.
But in the current NRI implementation, what we see in the containerd, it might be not as easy as we initially thought.
Okay.
So practically, like what we learned in the end of last year is what containerd is expecting kind of like fat clients. So Docker is the one who prepares the container spec. So modification on containerd side is theoretically possible, but it's something what we need on Thursday to discuss with containerd maintainers. So where we actually hooking for NRI. Because if we can hook it into the core, it's one story. If we need to hook it separately to each of our client interfaces, which will be completely separate story.
Okay, and just so that I'm clear as well, depending on the outcome of the community meeting on Thursday, that would mean that sort of the pull request that Ed is working on would then be not applicable, right? Because those would then be sort of consumed by some NRI implementation.
Yes. So if we get NRI going forward, then we can implement CDI part as just one of the NRI plugins.
Okay, cool.
If for some reason NRI is not going to be, then we need to have a plan B, and plan B currently is what for both for CRI and for containerd, we will need to prepare separate pull request for CDI using CDI APIs directly.
The good news that's actually for both, it should be pretty simple. So we know where to directly bolt it in to those runtimes if there is a need.
Cool. Okay, so I think from the API cleanup PR, I think, like as I said, I'll look at the PR one more time after this meeting, but I think it looks good, and we can use that as the starting point going forward. I think that'll make it easier to push further implementations, right? Then you don't have to use your own branch or fork to sort of discuss this with the community and things like that as well.
Okay.
And yeah.
So regarding this tagging, I would suggest let's try to update the Podman PR to use the new API. So if we found out what something is still missing, we will be able to fix it before we actually tag the new release.
I think we want to tag the. I think the point is to tag the one that isn't the new one, right? So to sort of say, because I mean, maybe that's a general discussion around versioning of the spec and things like that as well. Is currently that seems a little bit flexible, maybe is a best way of putting it. So or non-determinate. So I don't know whether we want to start at which point we want to start actually versioning the spec and API, so that we can say, for example, okay, this is now 0.3.0 for argument's sake, and then once 0.4.0 comes out, we say we've removed the API that was available in 0.2.0 and 0.3.0, for example, which we are technically allowed to do with the let's call it alpha or V0 status, right? Like we don't make any, I don't know if we've made any API promises, but it sort of, is that something we want to discuss now, or are we happy to just say, oh, well, look at this SHA, this is the version that Podman is consuming or was consuming at that point, and that's enough of a version for us?
Well, I think the tag operation is quite cheap, so we can tag some previous state just to have a reference what was used previously in what, let's say, Podman. Same thing actually applies to API specs. So like we can create like alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3, whatever we want, and as many as we want. It's anyway, like beside this small group of people, nobody is using it yet. For API deprecation policy, I think like we are in early stages again, like alphas, so we can easily drop something what is like at least one version is not used. So as you say, as you gave example with the Podman, so now we convert Podman to use the new API, and the next tag we just drop old functions which are not anymore used.
Okay, so do we then say tag the current version, the current head as like 0.2.0, and then bump the do we see that as a spec update, or like I suppose that's sort of the, do we always update the spec in conjunction with the API, or do we see that as like, obviously there are different aspects that we're changing, but doesn't make sense to keep them locked to the same version as it were for the time being, for simplicity's sake?
The spec update might make sense only if we had this reference to all devices.
Okay.
So because with new API, it changes the behavior of this all predicate. Well, it might be not a good idea. So what I'm saying, like we can tag the current state when merge with pull request with new API, and when we can tag another one which says what, like this is a new revision spec and API.
Okay, so yeah, I suppose that's my question. And the revision we use there is, for example, now 0.2.0, and then the next one we bump the spec version to 0.3.0, even though it's just an API update, or is that, I don't know. I don't know if this was discussed when the API was when the spec /API like in the past was formulated, or
no, we didn't.
I think this was never explicitly discussed. Yeah, I think it was never discussed then.
And we actually never had any tags yet.
Okay. Maybe let me. Okay, so I mean, at the very least, we have the SHAs, right? So we know, and we're not pushing to the repository. So we have this history there. So let me maybe just write up a quick proposal for how we can handle this in terms of sort of what we tag now and where we update what as soon as we merge in this pull request. I don't think it blocks the pull request at all. It just we can do that after the fact as well, right? So
yeah, tags can be added also retrospectively.
That's
not a problem.
Exactly.
But I think that we should, decide, because so in principle now, so if we think about the repo, so we have two places where we version. One is the actual, so just the structural representation of the CDI spec, and that has an explicit version. And there is other version, which is the versioning the sort of whole project, and in a way, that's more like, I think, a versioning of the APIs provided. Not just because the spec file itself is, in my opinion, a data model. The other thing is basically is a de facto implementation of interacting with CDI, how to consume it and so forth. And I think the tags are more like this, and the explicit thing inside the spec file is a versioning of the data model, in my opinion. This is, but I might be wrong. So I mean, this is just how I view it. But this is something that I think we should decide, and I think then we should stick to it.
Yeah, but I suppose the question is, how does one decouple them, right? Like, unless you're running in separate, unless you actually have separate repositories, right? Like you actually.
Yeah, but so that's true, but so there are, I think there are some clear cases where you have to change, or in principle, ideally you should change the spec version itself. So the version which is put inside the spec. And we already had one such change, actually, when we removed the short.
Yeah, the read, write, modify, I think we fixed some stuff, right?
Yeah, plus this when we removed basically those fields that were never actually used there by this implementation. But in principle, some other implementations could have used it. So I think those are the cases where you clearly have to update when you make backward incompatible changes to the data model itself. I think then you must bump the version of the spec itself. But then it's a good question that if you are not doing those, but you are just changing in a way the library, then does that warrant also an update of the sort of data model version? So these are good questions.
Not necessarily. So what
I also feel like that it's not necessary, but I think we should think this through somehow. And then
I have an idea. So right now our spec.md file, it just mentions what we have a version like 0.10, right?
I think it's 0.20 currently. I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Example says 0.20, but spec.md says 0.10.
Okay.
and
consistent.
Yes, and we never had actually different target releases. So my suggestion is such: let's use for spec the increments like 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and 0.4, and so on. Like not using the third digit. But if for some reason we are updating the library or some like code-based changes, when we can tag the project repository with, let's say, like 0.2, 0.1, 0.3, 0.4, like using the third digit.
Okay, so what you are saying is basically that whenever we change the data model, we will bump this minor version number.
Yes.
And whenever we make functional changes to the library, then it's from the minor version number, it stays in sync with the spec, but we change this patch level.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think that should work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that because just from a consumption perspective, like there is not currently a way for customers to, unless they are re-implementing everything around. I suppose that will. Wait, let me just clarify. I think that means that customers, if they are interested in only the spec, they will pull in any of the tags that have the associated minor number, right? And they will get the spec as defined by that tag.
Yeah.
Whereas if they are interested in a particular API addition, then they will need to ensure that they consume the version with the patch version that they are actually interested in. And that will also pull in the associated spec, because we're not necessarily performing the checks while we're busy implementing the API. We're not sort of necessarily very strict in terms of backward compatibility, right? Like I think we don't make those guarantees ourselves, right? Or unless we try, but we don't necessarily make such guarantees, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so that's a good, I think that's a good way to start, and we could always change it later.
Okay.
All right, anything else?
No.
Ivan, you are typing, yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm just typing it. And number 2 indicate. Sorry, my daughter just got home from daycare and she's expressing her feelings about things.
Okay. It's like me
to indicate. Yeah, exactly. It's like yeah, API or functional change, right? Right. Okay, cool. So
so if we're changing something in the spec which is not backward compatible, when we bump in a minor version.
Yeah. Okay. Does that, like, what are non-backward compatible changes, right? Like, because in this case, unless it's just editing some comment or something like that, right? Because this is sort of,
yeah, if there are no functional changes, then I mean there are no behavioral changes, then there is no need to bump.
Yeah, well, that's actually a good word. So if spec implies change in any of big behavioral, when we bump a version.
then we bump the minor version as well.
Mine, yeah.
Okay. I'll look at the current state and just make a suggestion of tags. Make a suggestion of the tags to use then, considering the. So looking at basically the history and saying, okay, at this point we had 0.1.0. At this point we made a spec change to that 0.2.0. We added some functionality, and now we added this other API, which is then 0.2.0. So make a proposal for the tags that we will associate with particular commits in the history then.
Okay.
Taking this suggestion, and then we can move on from there. So then at least we have sort of fixed references that we can use to, yeah, please explain. Yes, good point. So the references are, yeah, cool. Okay. Anything else?
At least not from my side.
Okay.
Not from my side either.
Okay. I have now, let me just double check. I think I have added the, let me add myself as a guest here. Yes, good. No, it's not that one. I have added the container D meeting to my calendar. I will, double check with the boss, namely my family, to see whether I can do that, but I should be able to attend it at least this week.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be like a recurrent meeting. Well, I don't think you need to be on recurrent meeting, but this week is kind of important for if you want to have a NRI discussion.
Cool. I think that's good. Yeah, sounds fine. Okay. Yeah, I'll be sure to be there this week.
Yeah. Good.
Okay.
So, John?
Yes, there's nothing more from my side. So if everyone else is okay, then that sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
Have a nice day, guys.
Yeah, let's continue on the Slack.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Thanks a lot. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.